Yeah, we're live. What's up? I got my lighting all situated here. I want to talk today. We're going to talk a little bit about turbo stuff on a big block Chevy. If you haven't taken a look at the video, take a look at the video that I just posted. That actually doesn't have the turbo on it yet, but we did run a big block Chevy made some modifications to a Gen 5 motor that had peanut port heads on it, and we ran some upgrades on that with the peanut port heads. We ran some camshafts, different intake manifolds. And then I actually upgraded the motor with the peanut port heads. We put higher compression pistons in it, typical kind of 18 to 22 kind of CC dome pistons to bring the compression up, because the flat top stuff are actually slight dish in the in some of those motors. The compression's really low on those. It's just awful, but they will run on anything. They'll run on 87 octane, and that's what most guys put in them. They'll lug them up the mountain with, towing a trailer and stuff. So they have to make sure that they're kind of safe. We did a lot of upgrades on those, and then eventually in the video, we replaced the peanut port heads with a good set of profiler heads. As a matter of fact, we put heads on that were just way more than we needed on that combination. There was a lot of power potential on those heads. Well, my question really is, my question, why you can Firebride, you can ask the Ford engine company or the general engines. That's the thing that I always bring up when people bring up that stuff. But I wanted to find out is what you guys thought about turbo applications. So normally when we look at applications, whether it's an LS or a Coyote or whatever it is, and then if you double the pressure, 14.7 pounds of boost, double the power output. Now, obviously, that takes a lot of doing. It takes the right kind of intercooling and the right octane and the right timing and all of that stuff to make it work. And obviously, it takes a turbo capable of supporting whatever power level that is at whatever boost level that is. So if you have a turbo that's too small, it's not going to do that. If you have a turbo that's too big and you're in the surge line, that's also not going to work. So those things have to be right. But here's my question, and it's on basically on this big block. It's on a limited application. So if we have a cylinder head like that peanut port head, and it flows, I don't know, 230 or 240, let's say. So we have enough power to support somewhere near 500 horsepower. I think we've made close to 500 horsepower with a ported peanut port. But let's say we're getting near the limit of the flow rate of the head. So let's say that we have a peanut port head that flows, let's say it flows 240, and let's say we're making 480, and then we add boost to it. So we have a motor that's making 480 horsepower, or in the case of our big block that we did on there, 450 horsepower. If we start adding boost to that, do you think that the port volume is too small to support the power that we want to get to? Like, how much boost that you think we can run to that and still kind of get our multiplier effect? So if we have a 450 horsepower motor and we run 14.7 pounds of boost, can we get 900? And if we can, how far can we keep going before that restrictive head starts becoming a problem? So let me know what you guys think. It's interesting to consider. I know that we talk about the multiplier effect of the turbo, but is there a limitation on there if the rest of the combination? And then the flip side to that, if we have a restrictive head, like, if we have a 5-liter Ford with a stock E7TE head, and we turbocharge that, and we eventually run into some sort of flow restriction on that, what happens when we have the other situation? What happens when we have a combination where we're not using anywhere near what the head can do? So like in the case of the big block, we had the profiler heads, and those things flowed like almost 370. So, and we were making 550 or 560. So we were nowhere near what the power potential of those heads was, because we didn't have enough motor, we didn't have enough camshaft or compression or all that stuff to be making the power output that those heads would support. What happens when we turbocharge that? Do they gain more on that combination than they do on the limited head combination at the same boost? I know that we're going to gain more because we're starting with more power, but are those more receptive to boost than ones where we're limiting the power output by the head flow? And this is an interesting conversation. I've had this with a number of different people, and the example that I was bringing up are Honda stuff, like Honda B series stuff, and especially Honda K series stuff. A lot of times we will do better than the formula suggests on some of these Honda motors. And my suspicion has always been that it's because of the head flow relative to the NA power output on those combinations, that we have way more head flow than we're taking advantage of the Honda factory stuff, even, you know, and at the factory power levels, has way more cylinder head than it needs to produce the power output that we're trying to make, NA anyways. And then when we add boost, we sometimes get better gains than we do on other things. So are some of these combinations, you know, do Honda motors in particular, or some other kinds of motors, do they love turbos, and do they do that because we have lots and lots of cylinder head flow? So let me know what you guys think. Just interesting stuff that I was thinking about when we were doing the Joshua. I've read Corky's book. I've met Corky before, and he's a good guy. He had a lot of crazy stories when we were out doing the road and track thing. The Corky Bill's book doesn't cover what I'm talking about. Supervet, we do use break-in oil, and especially if it's a flat tappet cam, then we use something that has really high zinc in it. Well, Todd, the question though is, we know that you can double the power output at double the pressure on some combinations, but can we do better than that on something that has a whole lot of head flow relative to the NA power output? That's the question. I wondered if people have any opinion on that. So the answer is Hondas are small displacement, and the smaller the displacement, the easier it is to fill with lots of boost. The Mazda BPZE 1.8 loves boost. Oh, I haven't met a motor yet that doesn't love boost. Problem is that stock Honda head bolt stretch and introduce head lift. So we did run a turbo on the, on the Honda, or on the big block Chevy. Although I did run it with different heads. I didn't run it with the, I don't think we ran it with the peanut port heads, and I should have, because it's something I would like to find out, and I'd like to show, because I get lots of questions about that. Hey, we have peanut port heads, and how far can you take those, and how much power can you make on the big block stuff with those, and then how much more obviously can you make with boost. And I know when I was reading some of the comments earlier, somebody, and I think it was Tim, was recommending that you do it with a centrifugal blower, so that when the head kind of signs off, the blower keeps going, and it does that with intake manifolds and stuff too, because it artificially increases the RPM or where these things make power, because it has a rising boost curve, and that works pretty well. But I'm interested to see what happens if we put a turbo on that. If we can, I think at some level we can double the power output, but I wonder if we run into diminishing returns. And the interesting thing would be see if we have to get boost buildup. So that would almost be easier to test with a centrifugal blower, to find out if we're stacking boost in the intake manifold. The stock Honda head bolts will stretch. We've made lots of boost with the stock Honda head bolt, although whenever we run the stuff at Bonneville, we always put ARP stuff in it. Timmy wants to know, will you lose some boost pressure with the bigger heads, or are they able to flow easier? I would imagine we definitely gain more horsepower. That's an interesting thing. I know that when I was doing stuff way back with Jim Bell on the blower stuff, he was suggesting that you shouldn't change the heads. And I said, that's 100% not right, because and I showed him all the cam tests I did. When we change the cam, the boost goes down and the power goes up, which is exactly what you want it to do. And then the same thing with the heads. If you improve the power output NA, which a ported head will do, and then it will make things easier under boost. The difficulty becomes with turbo, which if it's regulated by boost pressure, it will artificially increase the speed of the blower to make that boost pressure at this new level, because you've increased the power output of the NA motor. So it's gonna have to spin faster to make 10 pounds on the new power output. The centrifugal blower doesn't do that. What happens is the boost just comes down because it's supplying a given amount of airflow. Now the airflow might also change because you've changed the NA motor, but what will typically happen is if we put a different camshaft in or put ported heads on in place of stock heads, we'll see a drop in boost and an increase in power. And then obviously if you turn the boost up by changing the pulley back to what the boost was with the other combination, and I hardly ever did that. But if you did that, then you would have even more of a power gain. It may help viewers if you repeat the question. So the question is, if you have a head limited application, like I was talking about the big block with the peanut port heads, if we've already kind of maxed out the head flow, let's say we've got a head that flows 225 and we're making 450 horsepower. So we're making 2 horsepower per CFM, which is pretty good. And we've got small ports on that big block. So if we run boost on it and we run 14.7 pounds, we're making 450 horsepower. Let's say we make 900. But how much more boost can we add before that starts becoming a restriction? And then the flip side to that is if we have a head like we had on that big block that flows enough to support 750 horsepower and we're only making 550, if we're making 550 and we add 14.7 pounds of boost, is it possible to more than double the power output because we have lots of head flow? And then the example I was using is with Honda stuff, which typically have way more head flow than the power output that they're making. So I wondered if those are more receptive to boost and they make more power than other applications that we've seen. So I just wanted to get your guys' view on that. Daniel says an LS motor with 8.2 to 1 compression with big ported heads will much exceed the double horsepower at 15 pounds of boost. I haven't seen that. I have seen that when you have really, really low charge temperature. So when we run ice water through our intercooler, that helps. Or when you change from the NA power output and then you add E85, which itself adds power, then sometimes you can more than double the power output. But you've made another change there that's not reflective of what's happening with the NA motor. Yeah, being able to have the boost run with in relation to RPM would be really kind of cool. Racer D, you're not new to the channel, right? Why would you spend time building the engine wrong? A waste of time and money. No, we don't build motors to make maximum power. Lots of engine builders do that and guys that go race and stuff, but that's not what I do here. I don't build motors to make the maximum amount of power. We build motors and get motors from the wrecking yard normally to test all of this stuff and to show you what works and what doesn't work. It's not to put together the most powerful 5.3 I possibly can. So I use the best head and the best camshaft and the best turbos and the best intercooler and all that. That's not what this is about. We got to test different intake manifolds. We got to test different cylinder heads, different camshafts, all of that stuff to show people what works. Zach, hey, I have a question. I built a stage 2 LS. Rings are gapped. 25 and 27, bottom end ARP bolts. So you put ARP bolts in the main studs? Can the stock bottom end hold 20 pounds? Yeah, look at all the big bang stuff. All the big bang stuff, the stock bottom end is all stock. I didn't even put anything in the bottom end. Stock cross bolts, stock main bolts, all of that is just stock. The only thing we did was put ring gap in the stock pistons. So yeah, they can handle that much boost. You ever turboed a 289 short stroke 4-inch Ford? It's compared to a 4.8 V8. No, I haven't run a short stroke with a 4-inch bore. Todd wants to know, can you have too big of a head with a roots blower on a big block Chevy and a jet boat application or low RPM torque? Well, I did a head test on 2 airflow research heads, one fairly big, like a 3, I think we did a 305 and a 325 or a 335, might have been a 345, I don't know. And we ran it with a blower, and they both made, and it was on a 496. It is about at a 900 to 1,000 horsepower, I think. And they both made exactly the same power and exactly the same curve through the whole thing. So I don't think you're going to have a problem with that. John, I'll let you know when that happens. John's question is, when do you sleep? I don't know yet. Boost for peanut ports. Skull, you'll like those heads. Those things work really well on the Cadillacs, the Cadco heads. You should do a big bang build on an engine that has no right at all being modified. So, like, give me an example. Fastest pennant, MAF data would be good. If I had airflow data going in there, that would be nice. David, the 900 horsepower thing in the 14 PSI deal from 450 NA, that doesn't always happen. And it doesn't always happen for a lot of different reasons. It doesn't happen if your intercooler is not great. It doesn't happen if you don't have enough timing. It doesn't happen for it doesn't happen for a variety of reasons. If the turbo is not in its efficiency range, sometimes that happens. And then sometimes you can actually do better than that. Like I said, the only time I've seen it happen sometimes on Honda stuff, but I've seen it happen when we have very, very cold charge temperature. So when we have ice water, we more than double the NA power output because we've lowered the charge temperature so low. And if you take that to an extreme, like with the compressed air supercharging stuff, I mean, obviously they have no parasitic loss and not even any pumping losses from driving a turbo. But the thing that they really have going for them is they have negative number charge temperatures. So when you have that, they were getting 100% increase in NA power at about 7 or 8 pounds. So you can do that with a really, really low charge temperature. I don't, JNL, I don't think I've tested the 4x4 line of cams. I think I've tested some of the marine cams, but not the 4x4 stuff. It's all about air density. Gail Banks advertisement. Yes, a quad 4, and yes, an Iron Duke. Both of those are good. Yes, a 2.3 Durotech. All of those are good. Racer, we did those heads long ago, and we didn't put a 219 or a 1.8 exhaust or a 1.8 exhaust valve in there. I think it had, when we ran it, I think it had stock valves in it. SHO Taurus motor would be good. I've always liked those. Andy saying he recently saw something that said for every degree a cam is off its center line, the chamber temperature is increased by 300 degrees. That seems like a lot. Skillmaster, a 289 Ford and a GM 4.8 would really not be much of a comparison. We've put together a couple of 289s, and like a stock one struggled to get to 300 horsepower, and any 4.8 that we go get from the wrecking yard makes 330 or 335. So it's and if you flow tested a stock Ford 289 head, it probably flows about 155 or 160. So that's going to be 60 or 70 less, or maybe more than that, CFM less than a 4.8. So the 4.8 is has the 289 pretty well covered. Zach, the injectors that we run were Snake Eater Performance 1500 cc's. We've run lots of other ones, some 80s and stuff. Just size it for your look at the power output. Don't look at the boost. Yeah, Todd, that's a good combination. 5,000 RPM, 62 miles an hour, and a big boat. Val Kilmore, the Geo Metro 3-cylinder is the most worthless engine you could big bang. You should bite your tongue, man. That's like the brother-in-law or something to the Sprint 3-cylinder turbo motor, which is maybe the best motor ever made. RB25 will not be big banged. I like that motor too much, but we will do lots of testing with it. Yes, James, a Gen 1 350. Yes, I do want to do that. We'll do a Vortec one. Yeah, Tim, the Iron Duke is not terribly powerful. Victorville. Never tested a 3.9 V8. Roberto, I have a 1500 Silverado. 2002, the best year, still with the manual throttle body. Yeah, Karen, turbo in that Geo Metro. That's right. You're doing the Geo Metro stuff. I set 3 land speed records with my Sprint turbo. So it made all of 100, when we raced it anyway, it made all of 110 horsepower at the tire. We made as much as 120 at the tire with a stock turbo, and that's about all it would do. It just wouldn't make any more, it wouldn't make any more power because it's a really tiny turbo. It's about this big. When we put bigger turbos on it, it would actually make more power. And I still have that motor. Saab 9000, a Vortec with an LT1 or LT4 cam. Yeah, you can do that. Yeah, I'm sure Gale has some. Gale has done like all kinds of crazy stuff. He especially back in the day. I want to hear about that. So he's done a lot of neat new stuff too that he's involved in. But I want to hear about the old stuff that he did when he was putting turbo stuff together. Austin, so you want to run 700 lift with a with a stock duration camshaft? Kyle, the guys at Westec have run a couple of 396s there, but I haven't built one of those. The laser dude, I saw the video on the LS2 cam and the 5.3. Do you need to program the computer after installing it? We run a standalone management system. We ran a Holley HP on this, so we dialed in the air, fuel, and timing for each one of those different camshafts. 250. Man, Tim is just not liking those other motors. Andy's liking the peanut ports. Electric boost hillbilly would be very, very cool. Yeah, Karen, a B16 turbo would be a really big step up from the 3-cylinder Metro turbo. Even really an NA B16 would be a big step up. Yeah, yeah, Brule should. I don't know that he's going to be real YouTube savvy or not. He has a lot of stuff to do. Your Iron Duke made 200 foot-pounds and 170 horsepower on pump gas at 5,200. How many pounds of boost was that? I haven't flowed the Iron LT1 heads yet. T25 junkyard, nice. Vortec FMU and a fuel pump, perfect. With no, did you just move the distributor to change the timing? Scott McMullen, yes, people have done that. The guys at Comp do what they're called their 4-pattern camshaft, and they do it exactly for that reason for intake manifolds. The problem is you can't change the fundamental nature of the intake manifold just with camshaft changes. You can change the initiation of the reflected wave, which helps a little bit, but it still doesn't change what's happening with 4 longs and 4 short runners. Silkmaster, I've never run a 3.9. I only got 50 likes, man. Come on, what's up? Yeah, blow through DZ302. What we want to do, LTX, man, is do a blow through Gen 2 DZ302 LT1 base motor, and we'll definitely do something like that. Jeep Commander swaps. Stock 5. Well, if you have a stock 5.7 Hemi in there already, then you should just add boost to the Hemi. You're gonna leave for half an hour. I edited that video already. I had family stuff I had to take care of, man. You got to do. Oh, a Harbor Freight Big Bang. Yeah, that would be good. I would really like to do a Harbor Freight go-kart for my kids. I think that would be cool. Big Bang everything. Hillbilly Delight. Yeah, $1.49. What's up? What I would like to do, and if I should just do it anyways, is like the 2.8 and the 3.1 and the 3400 GM stuff. I'd like to just put those on there and just run the boost up. BMWs I'd really like to do too. I like BMWs a lot. And what engine was I talking to? Oh, the other motor that I want to do, and maybe somebody knows, what I'd like to do is run a 2.2 liter or a 2.5 liter Dodge, the Omni GLH motor on the engine dyno. So somebody come up with some cool idea the way that I can do that. What are the bell housings, and are there bell housing adapters that would adapt that thing to did anybody run any of these things with turbo 400s or turbo 350s, or are there any adapters for that thing? Because I'd like to run one of those on the engine dyno. It's a little problematic because of the fitment and everything. So doing intake swaps and all of that stuff is going to be problematic in that car. So doing those things on the engine dyno would be a lot easier, because then I can run T1 stuff and T2 stuff and go through all of the iterations and show people what they do. And that would be really cool to run one of those on the engine dyno. So if anybody knows how we can make that happen, please chime in, or anybody else that I can talk to try to make that happen. Perfect. We just moved the distributor till it sounded good under boost, till we got rid of most of the rattling. $450, Alan. That's a good deal. Big bang on a Ford Ranger. The other thing I'd like to do a big bang on is I'd like to do the 1UZ or the 3UZ Toyota. I'd like to do the 5.6 Nissan, and I'd also like to do a Mercedes V8. The Honda Insight, that would be cool. I'd like to just have the Honda Insight that I could put something else in. 4.9. Yeah, I almost have to do a that would be on the list too of things that I would just put on and blow up. I would like to do a Northstar motor because everybody wants to see the Northstar done. Yes, I know the Ford 300 as well. We definitely want to do that. No Big Bang 12 valve Cummins, no diesel stuff. 215 V8, yeah, the TR8. I think Uncle Tony just did a thing about how that's the best motor in the world somehow. He's got a lot of interesting ideas. 4-liter Jeep, I definitely want to do mods on. K-swap Insight, yeah, I'd like to do something kind of unique. I want to build a really small K-series motor. I never heard anything about 823 heads on my L9H. I don't recognize the L9H. Is that if it's at least a 6-liter, then you can do that. And if it's a 6.2 liter, it's even better. If it's a 5.3, that's not going to work. Thoughts on the old Crane 274 HO cam? Are you talking about the 274, the Crane version of the 274 Extreme Energy 5-liter cam? If so, then yes, that's actually the original one that I ran. I ran the Crane version of that long before I did any of the comp stuff. Omar, it doesn't matter whether you use a 2-bolt or a 4-bolt for 350 horsepower. A Datsun 210, yes, those are cool. 510 is even kind of cooler, but a B210, I like those. Let's see. James says boosted 2.2s and 2.5s are great. Got a guy that wants me to tune his with a mega squirt. Well, as soon as he is done with it, the manual trans will die horribly. Yeah, but you can upgrade the trans though to the, what is it, the 535 or whatever the other upgraded trans is. No, diesels are good. I like diesel trucks. They work perfect for. I had a Cummins diesel, a Dodge, and for towing, you could tow a house with it. It was amazing, and that's what they're perfect for. And lots of guys obviously are doing other things and making 1,000,000 foot-pounds of torque, and so you can also make them fast. But I'm not going to be testing any on the engine dyno. Yeah, there's a lot of guys that have run. There's some good videos up of guys getting crazy with the diesel stuff on the engine dynos and having them run away and blow themselves up in spectacular fashion. It's pretty exciting. Kevin, that PO box that you're looking for is West Tech Performance. That's where it would go because that's where I would test it. A 22R Toyota would be kind of cool. Ooh, a 69 Datsun Roadster. Yeah, that's a big yes on that. The dyno, I think, will go to 2000. They don't ever do that, but you can go to they just got a power mark, which I think is higher. If there's anybody out there that has any Nissan K24As, I think that's what it was. The ones that were in the 240SXs. I have some. I think I have some head studs and some gaskets if anybody needs those. Let's see. Scott says, I knew LS guys do a 4-inch stroke. My question is, I have a 4-inch stroke, 350 mains, 2-inch rod crank for a standard first-gen small block Chevy. I have plenty of standard bore 350s. Is it a waste of time? Are you asking if you should do a standard bore, Scott? A slide barrel carb. The coolest car I've ever owned was that Ford GT. Was a 2006 Ford GT, and the Chevy Sprint Turbo. Close second. Oh, see, goes to 11. See, that's why I have these things. Early Dodge Dakota truck had a 2.5 liter four cylinder that should bolt up to the turbo 2.2. That would be super cool if that's the case. So I got to write that down. Dodge truck. Bell housing. Nice. Awesome. Okay, so your question was a 4-inch stroke. Yeah, on a small block Chevy, that's not a good idea. You have to do all kinds of stuff. You have to cut the camshaft, and the rods don't fit, and you'll have all kinds of problems with that. Is it wise to swap out a 4.6 for an LS motor? Yes, it is. You can upgrade your 4.6 and you can get somewhere with that, or if you want lots of power, you can go with an LS. I think that, Karen, I think that the highest number is probably 17 something, probably from one of either one of Miller's motors or Mahovitz's. They've all done stuff that's up in that range. I don't know what the peak number is, but it's all up in that range. Bill, what's up? No questions? A K824 swap and an 84 Datsun 720 4x4. So do you need head studs and stuff for that? Hey, Rich, did you hear about the Google Act 2021? I did not. Is that something I should know about? Yeah, the big V6s. A couple of guys have asked about the big GM V6s. I don't know if Westech has run Kazi headed stuff, but I don't know if they've run one of his. If you're asking about one of his mountain motors, I don't know if they've run that. Jasper, we try to read them all, man. US Mech or UPS Mech, send me a reminder, send me an email. I'll put it up down at AOL.com. What's up? There's an email address. Send me something to remind me, because I'm never going to use them. Ooh, the 2.5 Dakota was the most gutless vehicle I've ever owned. Daniel, the turbo 347 small block Ford on the street with an HX35. What size exhaust housing should I be looking for? Do you have different ones available to you? I think I would go with an 18. David, I'm saying, yeah, we can double the power output at 14.7 pounds of boost. What I'm wondering, and that's actually fairly easy if everything is right, but what I'm wondering is beyond that, where do we start running into limitations? But yeah, if the charge temperature is cold, you can more than double the power output. Do I think long tube headers are a must with a supercharged 4.62 valve running 10 pounds? That's up to you. The headers will make more power, but whether or not people want to deal with the headers, some people worry that they leak. You have to obviously change the rest of your exhaust, whether or not you live in an area where you have to have the catalytic converters and all that stuff. So those are all things to decide. Jasper, the shorty headers are not going to gain you much compared to stock exhaust manifolds. Long tube headers will, because they have a scavenging effect, but shorty headers, you're not going to get very much, if anything. What if the Big Bang LS makes 2,000 horsepower and max out the dyno? Well, then I would have to say, hey, look, I put all of the boost to it, and the dyno is just too much of a sissy to handle all that. That's not going to happen with a stock bottom end, though. GM31 Vortec, test stock, cam boost. Yeah, we want to do all of that stuff. The VQ Nissans are good. Thumble, yeah, do 4-valve double over cam motors need less cam duration than 2-valve motors? They can make the same amount of power with less duration because they have more cylinder head flow. So if you take a look at, you can compare it 2-valve versus 4-valve, but if you look at like a head limited application like the old Fuelie headed small blocks, like a DZ302 or a 365 horse 327, or there's a lot of other examples, but they use lots and lots and lots of cam timing to try to get the things to rev because they didn't have a lot of head flow. But if you put a really good head in that, all of a sudden it's like, hey, I can now take advantage of this camshaft. Although those cams were fairly low lift too, because again, the head was just not good. So same thing on the 2-valve, 4-valve stuff. A 4-valve head flows a lot more than a 2-valve, so it's going to make lots more power with the same cam timing. Is there an engine swap cheaper to get 500 wheel horsepower than an LS1? If there is, I don't know about it. Honda Spoon motors. Yeah, Samuel, I'm familiar with the RPM Act. Jeff wants to know if all the engines I've ever tested double the power output at 14.7 pounds of boost. No, a lot of times we don't run that much boost, and a lot of times we're not trying to maximize the tune. Sometimes I've run them on pump gas. Sometimes we've run them with other limitations, like we don't have the right size turbo. We don't have enough intercooling. So not always. That doesn't always happen. Admiral, how come you're being ignored? Nobody's ignoring you. What's your question? An NA2JZ can get you 500 horsepower. I'd like I'd like to see an NA one make that kind of power. Happy dude, yeah, I'm a happy dude also. Thank you, sir. But if you have any questions, please let me know. Which aluminum block would you recommend for a small block Ford on the street? The Datsun's Fairlady Roadster likes a light engine. And if you have to do a small block Ford, I would recommend an L33, a small block an LS, and LS actually to put in there. I think you'd be much better off. It'd be a lot easier to make power in. But if you have to do a small block Ford, then probably Dart or Ford Racing. Yeah, Tim, I agree. A 500 horsepower NA2J, that's going to be a tough order. It's going to be a lot of RPM, and it's going to be really, really expensive. Okay, if he's saying get an NA2J, which is less expensive than a turbo one, and then turbo, yeah, that makes more sense. I was wondering if you had any estimate of what you might think will bust the eventual 4.6 Big Bang motor. So are we talking about a 2-valve motor? We've done 750 foot-pounds, so I don't think that that's it. But I don't know. I don't know where that will be. I know that it wasn't 400 horsepower, and it wasn't 500 horsepower, and it wasn't 6, and it wasn't 7. So it's somewhere past that. Matt's changing his plugs. Make sure to gap those things. Admiral, that would be the number I'd like to get to. I would be really happy if we had a 2-valve stock bottom end with ring gap and we had ported heads on it and cams, and then ran. I don't know what I would do with the intake manifold. I almost think that I would do one like one of the ones that I made, but I'd have to weld it up if we were going to run a bunch of boost to it, because I don't think that the I'd like to run more RPM than the PI manifold is going to allow us to do. It's because I want to make peak power at about 6,000 or so. So I think I would put an intake manifold that's going to allow us to rev it a little bit. And then, but then I'm worried about is the RPM going to hurt it? Is the boost going to hurt it? I know that everybody tells me boost softens the RPM and yada, 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 but it's still, RPM still worries me. But 1,000, if we could get to 1,000 with a 2-valve under boost with a stock bottom end, I think that that would say something. The iron blocks supposedly die around 9 to 1,200. See, that's a really big range. Like, you're talking about a 300 horsepower range. That's a lot, and it needs to be narrower than that. We need to know. I haven't done a 361 Mopar. Eric, I know the supercharged 3.8. I'm trying to get it. We're just trying to get it running. If I could get the thing running, and then I could be on the dyno and be testing it and be happy. A thermoquad versus a thermojet versus a quadrajet versus a Holly 2-barrel. No, I didn't have that planned. Adrian, I'm pretty sure we could make 1,000 with a PI manifold, because we could make. I know we've made over 400 with them NA, so I'm sure we could get to 1,000. I just don't want to do it at the RPM where that's going to make it, because the torque number is going to be really high. Bill, I'd actually like to try the swirl ports. Somebody was suggesting that I combine those with the tune port manifold on the L99 to make really big torque. I don't know if that would be the case, but it would be interesting to try. A concrete block. We're not going to do that to the block. Thumble, yeah, the same thing would happen. If you put a big cam in it, it's going to hurt low end. Let's see, so you wouldn't expect a big cam to hurt low end torque worse and a double head. Yes, it will still hurt low speed power. As a matter of fact, it may be worse than the double overhead cam motor because it has more head flow. So it effectively has a wilder combination to start off with. That's why you don't need lots of camshaft. So you put less camshaft in the 4-valve motor. Barbarier. Okay, here's a question. Do you use mid-lift method for finding pushrod length? No, the video that I have up is the way that I do it. Like on an LS, I put the lifter on the heel of the cam so that the valve is closed. I put the rocker arms on, put the pushrod on. You can do it with a test pushrod length. But what I do is just start out with whatever pushrod I have, because that's going to tell me where I need to go. So then I zero lash it so that there's no movement, so that the pushrod's connecting to the lifter and to the rocker. And then I zero lash it so there's no movement. And then I count the number of turns that I have to turn the retaining bolt in to get the rocker down on the rocker pedestal. So if it's a half a turn, between a half turn and 1.5 turns, that pushrod length will work. If it's less than that, there's probably you're starting getting close to there being lash. So it's too short. And if you have to turn more than, I don't even usually like to go more than a full turn, but I'll go at turn and a quarter. If you start getting up into the 2-turn range, then it's too long and it's going to hang the valve open. So that's how I determine what pushrod length I use. And the reason I do that is because I'm checking that every time I put something together. So when you bolt the rockers on, you're actually doing a pushrod length test every time you do it. And because you do that all the time, you should get pretty good at it. So if you're tightening it on there and for some reason you're like, oh my God, this is like 2 turns, I wonder why the motor doesn't start. That's because the valve is hanging open and the pushrod length is too long. That's how I do it. And there's lots of different ways that guys do it. Samuel wants to know what I would put into my weekend fun car, which would probably be the Nova or the Omni if I get that. But I like testing stuff, even on that, even on those. For the Nova, I want to put a bunch of different 6-cylinders in it. But for the Omni, if I get that, I want to test a bunch of different turbo configurations and stuff. I have not seen a W43 in the flesh. What do you see as the most glaring failure point in a boosted stock bottom end Gen 4 big block? It's going to be a rod or a piston more than likely. Eric, want me to send you my HP Tuner Pro and an ECU with a wire harness for the 3.8? If you have that, that would be awesome. If we run the stock stuff, that would be great. We're looking at doing a Holly, and that's what we want to run on. I was going to buy an ATI dampener, and so that we could mount our trigger wheel, which I've already bought, so that we could run a standalone. But if you have that and that would work, that would be fantastic. Yeah, we don't test the fuel mileage on the engine dyno. Yeah, Fred, I don't think that even if that were the case, if one head flowed more than the other, I don't think that tells you that. It doesn't tell you that one head's better for boost and one head's better for NA. Yeah, if you see Patrick, if you see stuff like that where they're spinning the mains out of something, that's usually a machine problem. If they're like, which is why I like running motors from the wrecking yard, because you already know that they're running and they're running well. They have all the clearances that they need and all that stuff. So if you put that together and you put head studs in it, and you put good gaskets on it, if you put an MLS gasket on it, head studs on it, the first thing that's going to break on that big block is definitely going to be a rod or possibly a piston. A Terminator does have a different block than a 2-valve. That's it, Fred. That's an interesting statement. I'm pretty sure the C heads make more power than B heads if both are NA. I would see when people say stuff like that, I always want to see where the data is that they're using for that statement. Goes to 11. Richard, what's the smallest frame turbo that will flow 100 pounds a minute? I'd have to look at some maps to find out what the smallest frame would be for that. You need 1,000 horsepower. You just need it in a really small package. Got about 5 minutes. Oh, I love these comments. Daryl, would you ever build a viewer engine? I do viewer engines all the time. All of the viewers want junkyard motors, so that's what I put together. Daniel, I don't know what the Gen 5 stuff will take. I haven't seen anybody max one of those out. We've seen 4-digit stuff from people, but I don't know where the maximum is. No Ford tiny turbo motors in the future, at least not. The smallest one that I have in the future is the 300, so that's not even really that small. When can we expect to see the Nova on the road? It's going to go on a trailer and then on the road down to West Tech, and then it will go on the road after it gets put together. I would like a Ford Fiesta or a Ford Festiva. Either one of those would be awesome. Are you testing rockers on the 3800? I think we can. Ability goodness. You forgot the Y at the end of that, Tim. Next one's probably tomorrow, Jeff. I have 1-ton Gen 5 dually. Yeah, that's the motor that we did the video on. That's a that should be a throttle body 455 or 454, I mean. Sorry, Richard will demonstrate the reverse pattern cams absolutely do kill torque. I may have tested that once or twice, but you can't say that as a blanket statement. I just have never seen that work. But people are telling me on the Dodge Slant 6 that the factory camshaft that they offered with that crazy intake manifold, I can never remember the name of it, was a reverse pattern cam. So they're saying that works, and I'd like to test it to see if nobody's ever tried anything else because that was gospel and that's the way that it came, or if that's actually the case because of the, people always cite the head flow relationship, the intake to the exhaust flow relationship, and that's why it has to have a reverse pattern cam. I just haven't seen that happen, but I want that to be true. But until I actually see that happening and see it not make less power than a dual pattern going the other way or a single pattern, then I'll reserve judgment. But I want to test that. Yep, you want to put ring gap on a 4.6. Daniel, do you want to build a Ram Air 5 Pontiac? That would be the first time I did that, so I probably wouldn't be the right guy for that. I have a 347 Pontiac now, so I am a Pontiac owner officially. That would be very cool, Eric. Do you have my email address, right? It's in the comments. The L83 may get swapped over to port injection, or at least a hybrid of direct injection and port injection, so that I can do more testing with it. Yes, we're definitely doing magnums. And one of the things I'd like to do with the Dodge is, because I hear an awful lot from various people that you guys might know, how great the 318 is and how it's the best motor ever made, and how it's better than the 360. And I suspect that a 360 built with the same heads and cam and intake as a 318 is going to do exactly what every motor that I've ever tested, when one's bigger and one's smaller, it's going to do exactly that. The 360 is going to make more power. Just like it does, just like a an LT1 or a 327 makes more average power than a 302 because it's smaller. Now, if you limit it with cylinder head, then obviously you can limit to what the peak power is. But if you look at the average power for an LT1 compared to a DZ302, it's not even close. I mean, the torque production is just massively in favor of the bigger motor, and it should be. And I think we would see the same thing with a 318 versus a 360. And I think that the only people that would tell you that that little motor is better somehow is somebody who's never tested anything on the dyno, or even as a back-to-back at the track. If you put a GT45 on your truck, would you trust its dependability? I would trust the turbo a lot more than I would test the 4L60E transmission. The Caddy, I think, is almost done. That should be just about ready to run, and then the 292 should be right after that. Yeah, Thumble, they could have done that for pumping losses, but they did it on a high performance application with that weird 4-barrel intake manifold and stuff. And so they were trying to get performance out of that motor and not for fuel mileage. People with 318s say that. Yeah, and I'm not putting down a 318. It's a good motor. I'm just saying that when you compare a small motor versus a bigger motor, the bigger motor usually makes more power. A 5.3 makes more power than a 4.8 does, and a 6.0 makes more power than a 5.3. And I suspect when we test that a 5.9 is going to make more than a 5.2. Yeah, I've seen the head flow, Tim, on the slant 6. It's not quite even, but that's why they talk about that relationship, the intake, the exhaust flow relationship. But it's heads that are, that have really good exhaust flow compared to intake flow. And I still haven't seen them want a single or even reverse pattern cam. But if it does, that's fantastic. And all I want to do is, because I know that nobody out there has tested them. Nobody's tested all three of them, because that's just not what you do. This is the way that it's done. But I don't do it like that. I just test it and find out. And then if it doesn't work, then I can tell them, hey, look, we tested it and we know it doesn't work. So all of you guys were right. Or it does work and you guys should try this and it will make more power. Have you ever tested an Edelbrock ProFlow XT EFI on a big block Chevy? I don't think I have. I don't think I've run that particular like tunnel ram style intake on a big block. French Onion wants to know how the Midnight Performance guys are running a stock sealed in the sealed is in quotes. Coyote boosting it without running ring gap. Go just run with that. Just you do that and you run it without ring gap and just, let me know how it goes. And I want to do the 360 versus the 351 Windsor and then versus the 350 Chevy also, because those are all comparable displacements, even though the 360 has more, but we would like to see that. ProFlow versus the Terminator. Shadow Ops, what am I watching? twin M90s. Build a 351 Windsor or 351 Cleveland 2-barrel. Aaron, so you got ported Speedmaster heads for the Magnum? The 4206, the guys from guys down in San Diego, Schneider will regrind stuff for us. Yeah, the offset rocker geometry of the W2 stuff. But the TFS has Magnum heads now with a LA intake bolt pattern, which will be cool. And also the guys from Engine Quest did an iron head with that same thing. They had that head also with a Magnum bolt pattern, but they also have it with an LA bolt pattern. They're not cheap, but they're supposed to flow pretty well. And I saw some testing. I was going down the rabbit hole the other night and looking at that stuff. Resigned both the airflow research and Brodix stuff works good. Take a look at the big buck Chevy head test. I have both oval port and rec port head tests up there, so you can decide which ones of those you like. The 307 would be good. Yep, Aaron, the difference is just the way that they're oiled. Okay, one more question. I got to get going. Patrick, okay, you'll have the last question of the night. I do agree with you. We need another Big Bang 351, and it needs to be done right, because I think that thing, I made a few mistakes on that motor, and I think I put a video up about that. The camshaft was all wrong. The cylinder heads were great. The way that we were controlling boost was just super dumb, and that thing needs a better intake manifold on it. It needs a few different things that would make it better. And I think that we would see some fairly impressive numbers with the 351 in a Big Bang situation. And the other thing I want to do with the Big Bang stuff is I want to redo the intercooler that I have on there. The ins and outs for the water are too small. I don't really like. I really would just like a bigger intercooler assembly for the Big Bang stuff that I could just use on the dyno. I need to make something that has a stand too, because carrying that thing around and getting it all hooked up sometimes is kind of a pain. But if we can get more water flow through it, that's going to be good. We normally run ice water. If I can get more air flow through it too, there's not a lot of pressure drop, but when we're talking about 30 or 35 pounds or how much ever we're going to run through that, it could be a better core. It probably wasn't designed for what we're doing for it. The core seemed to cool fairly well, but again, we just need more water flow, and I would like to get more airflow through it. Thank you guys for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.